Right now, in a coffee shop somewhere, two strangers are exchanging three completely meaningless phrases.
Yeah, just totally empty words.
Right. They are saying words to each other that contain like almost zero actual factual information. Yet, without those exact phrases acting as this sort of invisible social security clearance, human interaction would just entirely grind to a halt.
Uh-huh.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are looking at the invisible scaffolding of human connection.
Such a great topic.
It really is. We are taking some very specific material today. It's an excerpt from a language text called Coffee Shop Connections, Basic English Introductions. We're going to use it to put a microscope on a single fleeting moment in time, because our mission today isn't just to, walk you through a language lesson. We're going to deconstruct the psychology of a fundamental human interaction by looking at a highly specific case study of two people meeting for the very first time.
And it's a fascinating exercise, really, because what seems like an ordinary, mundane first meeting, it actually contains a highly sophisticated, escalating sequence of social vulnerability. Like when you break it down, you realize we aren't just making small talk.
Right.
We're running these complex behavioral scripts that have literally evolved over millennia.
Exactly. And the case study we're pulling from our material involves two strangers, Alex and Mia. We're going to watch them meet at a coffee shop, and we're going to see exactly how three incredibly basic phrases work to establish physical safety, trigger cognitive categorization, and ultimately uncover social utility.
Yeah, the classic 3 steps.
But before we even get to the actual words they say to each other, we really have to start with the physical space, the setting itself, because the material explicitly places Alex and Mia in a coffee shop, and that fundamentally changes the power dynamics of the whole interaction.
Oh, absolutely. The setting always dictates the baseline rules of engagement. I mean, human beings are incredibly territorial creatures, whether we realize it or not. If you meet someone in their office or, in their home, there is this immediate subconscious power imbalance. One person is the host, who's controlling the environment, and the other is the guest, just sort of navigating this unfamiliar space.
Which really brings up the sociologist Ray Oldenburg and his concept of the third place.
Oh, yes. Perfect application of that.
Yeah, so for anyone listening, you have your first place, which is the home, your second place, which is the workplace, and the third place is the public communal space. So like a pub, a park, or in this case, a coffee shop is basically a neutral zone.
Precisely. A coffee shop is the quintessential modern third place. It's a highly public space, which gives you that baseline level of physical safety, but it's also deeply anonymous.
Yeah, all that ambient noise.
Exactly. You have the noise of the espresso machines and the background conversations, which creates this little bubble of privacy. Neither Alex nor Mia is on home turf here. They are absolute equals in a shared transient environment. And into this perfectly balanced ecosystem, we introduce our two subjects with their highly specific backgrounds.
All right, let's look at who they are. Our material establishes that Alex is from Canada, and he works as a graphic designer. Mia is from Japan, and she is studying marketing. Now, I want you to think about that specific collision of worlds for a second. We have a graphic designer and a marketing student meeting in this neutral zone. This isn't just a random pairing. It's a very specific intersection of complementary fields.
It really is. I mean, you have one discipline, graphic design, that is fundamentally visual, right? It's creative, it's aesthetic. And then you have another discipline, marketing, that is fundamentally strategic, analytical, audience-driven.
They meet each other.
Right. Alex creates the visual communication, and Mia studies how to position that communication to, make a demographic actually react to it.
Yeah.
But the catch is they don't know any of that yet.
Yeah.
Right now, they are just two physical bodies occupying the same neutral space. They have to somehow bridge the gap between their isolated experiences.
Which brings us to the very first bridge built between these two people. The interaction officially begins here. The physical setting is established, and the vulnerability basically escalates from the physical to the verbal. And the very first phrase exchanged is, "Nice to meet you."
4 words that carry an immense amount of evolutionary weight.
Okay, I got to push back on this, though.
Oh, really? Go for it.
Yeah, because I look at a phrase like, "nice to meet you," and I can't help but feel like these rigid societal scripts actually prevent genuine connection. It feels so performative.
Performative how?
Well, we're essentially just exchanging pre-programmed audio files, You don't know this person. You have zero data on whether meeting them is actually nice.
Sure.
Like, they could be your new best friend, or they could be an absolute nightmare of a human being. So are we just trapping ourselves in this performative loop of hollow small talk?
That is the most common critique of small talk. hands down, that it lacks authenticity. But that perspective assumes the purpose of the phrase is to convey literal truth. And it isn't. Nice to meet you is what evolutionary game theory calls a costless signal.
Wait, a costless signal?
Yes. So in evolutionary biology, animals use signals to communicate intent. A dog baring its teeth is a costly signal. It's preparing for violence, it takes energy, there's risk involved. But a costless signal is a low-stakes way to test for reciprocal altruism.
Okay, I'm following.
When two strangers meet, the baseline state of the human amygdala, which is the threat detection center of the brain, is just pure caution. It's asking, who is this person? What do they want? Are they a threat to my resources or my safety?
You know, it actually reminds me of computer networking.
Oh, how so?
There's this protocol called the TCP/IP handshake.
Mm-hmm.
When two computers want to connect over the internet, one doesn't just start blasting the other with files right away.
Right, that would crash the system.
Exactly. The first computer sends a SYN packet, basically saying, hey, I'd like to talk. And then the second computer sends back a SYN-ACK packet, saying, I hear you, and I'm ready to talk. They're just verifying that they speak the same protocol before any actual data is transferred.
Okay, that is a phenomenal analogy. I love that.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you is exactly that. It's the psychological SYN-ACK packet. When Alex and Mia exchange that phrase, they're not declaring a factual state of pleasure. They're establishing non-threat.
Just verifying the protocol.
Exactly. They are signaling to each other's amygdalas that they understand the social contract, they're civilized, and they are opting into this interaction in good faith. It's the verbal equivalent of showing your empty hands to prove you aren't holding a weapon.
So if you skip that step, if you just bypass the costless signal and start demanding information, the other person's brain registers it as a hostile act.
100%. If you just walk up to a stranger and say, where do you live and what is your job? It feels like an interrogation. It triggers the fight or flight response. The phrase, nice to meet you, basically paves the psychological road so that the heavier vehicles of identity and origin can safely drive over it.
Okay, so the threat level is neutralized. The TCP/IP handshake is complete. The physical space is safe. The verbal channel is open. Now, the interaction escalates to the next level of vulnerability. They move from establishing safety to cognitive categorization. And the phrase used to do this is, where are you from?
The big transition from acknowledging presence to seeking context.
And the material gives us the concrete facts here. Alex says he's from Canada. Mia says she is from Japan. And what really strikes me about this is the sheer velocity of the scope change.
What do you mean by scope change?
Well, imagine zooming out on a digital map. You're zoomed all the way in on this little intimate coffee shop table. And with one single forward question, the map violently zooms out. In a fraction of a second, you are bridging the physical distance between the North American landmass and the islands of Japan. It just shifts the context to the entire global stage.
It is a profound shift in scale, yeah. But the behavioral science behind why we ask this specific question is even more fascinating, because when you meet someone new, you have an infinite menu of questions you could ask.
Sure.
You could ask, what is your biggest fear? Or what did you have for breakfast? But almost universally, across cultures, we default to geography.
Yeah.
We ask for the coordinates of where someone used to be.
Why is that, though? Why is geographic origin the absolute first layer of identity we peel back?
It comes down to cognitive load. The human brain is an incredible machine, but it is an absolute energy hog. It consumes about 20% of the body's calories. Consequently, the brain is always looking for shortcuts heuristics to save processing power.
Right, because calculating everything from scratch is exhausting.
Exactly. When you meet a stranger, calculating their entire personality, their values, and their background from scratch requires massive cognitive effort.
So we basically ask for a label to save energy.
Yes. Geographic origin is essentially a heuristic zip file. By revealing that he is from Canada and she is from Japan, Alex and Mia are handing each other a massive, compressed folder of cultural context clues.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
When you hear Japan or when you hear Canada, your brain instantly downloads a set of assumptions, historical contexts, social norms, and cultural frameworks.
So you're using thin slicing. You're taking this tiny sliver of data, just a country name, and using it to build a predictive model of the person sitting across from you.
Precisely. And from a neuroscience perspective, this helps us navigate the in-group versus out-group dynamic. Throughout human history, knowing whether someone was from your tribe or a neighboring tribe was vital for survival.
But today, in a coffee shop, it functions a bit differently.
Right. Today, it lays down the foundation for empathy and curiosity. If Alex knows Mia is from Japan, he suddenly has a framework for a million potential follow-up questions about her transition to this new environment, the differences she has noticed, her experiences moving halfway across the world.
It gives the conversation actual forward momentum based on substance, rather than just the shared immediate experience of, standing in a line at a coffee shop. You're moving from the abstract setting into their geographic history. You've grounded them in reality. Alex is anchored to Canada, Mia is anchored to Japan.
Which brings us to the final escalation in our interaction. We've established physical safety in the third place. We've established psychological safety with a costless signal. We've categorized their historical context through geography. Now the vulnerability shifts from the past to the present. We move from origin to social utility.
And the phrase for this, straight from the material, is, what do you do for a living?
The ultimate pivot to the present tense.
And I really want you, listening right now, to think about this. Think about the last time you were at a networking event or a dinner party, and someone asked you what you did. Did you feel that slight, momentary panic of having to justify your worth?
Oh, everyone feels that panic.
Right. That feeling of having to neatly package your entire existence into a job title. Because why is labor almost always the very next thing we ask after origin? In our case study, Alex reveals he is a graphic designer, and Mia reveals she is studying marketing. They don't say, I'm a passionate amateur chef, or I am fiercely loyal to my friends. Society has collectively decided that our professions are the primary metrics of our identity.
It's a fascinating societal shift, and it's actually relatively recent in the grand scheme of human history. If you look back prior to the Industrial Revolution in agrarian societies, your identity was largely tied to your family and your land.
Because everyone knew everyone.
Exactly. You didn't need to ask someone what they did because the village already knew, or your surname literally told them, like John Baker, Sarah Smith, Thomas Carpenter.
Your name was your resume.
That's exactly it. But with the Industrial Revolution and the massive migration to urban centers, you suddenly had millions of strangers living in close proximity. You could no longer rely on familial reputation. Identity shifted from who your family is to what you produce in the market economy.
Wow.
That legacy is why we still ask, what do you do? It's a way of mapping a stranger onto the complex web of a modern economic society.
But there is a dark side to that, isn't there? Because asking, what do you do for a living, is so often criticized as a hierarchy check.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a way of sizing someone up. It's the social equivalent of asking, are you more important than me or less important than me? Can you do something for me, or should I just move on to the next person?
It can absolutely be weaponized as a status check. And let's be honest, in highly competitive environments, it often is. But if we look closely at this specific interaction between Alex and Mia, there is a much more constructive, almost beautiful layer to it. This phrase isn't just about establishing hierarchy, it's about unlocking practical potential.
It's that synergy we talked about earlier.
Yeah, precisely. This is the exact moment in the coffee shop where they discover that potential. The collision of the graphic designer and the marketing student. Asking about someone's labor or their studies is primarily about finding common ground or potential collaboration.
Right, because when Alex says graphic design and Mia says marketing, they suddenly realize they share a vocabulary.
Yes. They both understand the pain of tight deadlines, the challenge of interpreting client briefs, the metrics of audience engagement, and the power of visual branding.
It's almost like their geographical origins, Canada and Japan, made them distinct and interesting to each other. It provided the novelty. But their utility design and marketing makes them instantly relatable and potentially valuable to one another. It provides the glue.
That is a perfect way to synthesize it. The contrast of their origins creates the intrigue, but the overlap of their labor creates the connection. In the span of a minute, they have exchanged the zip files of their past and the blueprints of their present. They have completely remapped their relationship to one another.
So let's take a step back and look at what we've just witnessed in this microscopic slice of a seemingly basic language lesson. We took an excerpt meant for simple repetition, and we found this incredibly rigid, deeply psychological choreography of human connection. It's an escalation of vulnerability that happens millions of times a day, all over the world.
It is remarkably efficient when you break down the mechanics of it.
Yeah, let's recap it. Step 1, the greeting. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
The psychological TCP/IP handshake, executing a costless signal in the neutral zone of a third place to bypass the amygdala's threat detection and opt into the social contract.
Perfect summary.
Then step 2, origin. Where are you from? Dropping the digital pin on Canada and Japan, handing over the heuristic zip file of cultural context and saving cognitive processing power by grounding the stranger in a geographic reality.
And finally, step 3.
Right, step 3, utility. What do you do for a living? The legacy of the Industrial Revolution, shifting from the past to the present, discovering the overlap between the visual designer and the strategic marketer, and mapping a stranger onto your own social and economic web.
In just 3 short, mundane sentences, Alex and Mia have completely transitioned from anonymous, potentially threatening physical bodies occupying the same public space to individuals with known histories, categorized backgrounds, and overlapping professional interests. It is the molecular bond of human connection forming right before our eyes in real time.
It really is. It's the invisible scaffolding that allows society to function without collapsing into paranoia and isolation. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought, something to really chew on the next time you find yourself at a networking event or standing in line at a coffee shop, meeting your own Alex or your own Mia.
I love leaving people with a question.
Yeah, so think about this. Our foundational interactions, as laid out in the material we explored today, are built entirely on 2 pillars. Our past, where are you from, and our current labor, what you do for a living. We anchor ourselves in history, and we define ourselves by our immediate economic output. But how radically would our connections change? How fundamentally would society shift if the standard introductory script completely bypassed our geography and our job titles and asked about our future instead? What if the very first thing we asked a stranger wasn't where they've been or how they pay their bills, but instead, what are you hoping to build?
Wow. That completely rewires the psychological scaffolding right there.
It really does. It forces you to look at the invisible bonds of who we are becoming, rather than just categorizing the echoes of where we've been. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.